The Language of Survival, Shunkun no Genyu Episode 1, The Cavewoman's People, Daiwan Hua. Donkunu no Min, the roar did not build, it arrived, fully formed, enormous, from somewhere deep in the ancient dark, and hit the clearing like a physical wall. The ground beneath their feet resonated with it. The fire circle shivered, the prehistoric air, which had been pressing with that wrong silence for the past minute, finally explained itself. The trees parted, not slowly, not with warning. They simply exploded outward as something enormous drove through them, the way water drives through paper, with complete, indifferent, panicked force. The Spinosaurus was massive, in the way that made the word massive feel insufficient. 12 feet at the shoulder, 40 feet of ancient, wounded, maddened creature, its sail fin torn along one edge and bleeding, the mark of something that had been hunting it from deeper in the jungle and had found it. Its eyes were wild and rolling. It had not come here because it chose to. It had been driven here, and driven things were the most dangerous things in any world. It crashed into the clearing's edge and stopped, reading the space, reading the fire, reading the 12 small bodies standing in the open air. Nobody ran. Act 1, the 3-second rule. Mary Parker moved first, not toward the Spinosaurus, toward the feathered dinosaur, the small creature, the one that had fought alongside them, the one that had chosen to stand between danger and the family, had felt the Spinosaurus's presence before it arrived. Every instinct it possessed was screaming at it to bolt. Its clawed feet were already scrambling against the ground, its feathers raised along its spine, its head whipping side to side in the frantic calculation of something trying to find an escape route that would not draw the larger predator's attention. Escape routes that didn't exist. Mary read it in an instant. If it ran, the Spinosaurus would track the movement, and if the Spinosaurus tracked movement, the family was in its direct path. She stepped inside the small creature's space. No hesitation, no announcement. She simply moved into its frantic orbit, the way Amin had taught the Aikido blending entry. Not blocking, not grabbing, not forcing. Matching. Her body found the rhythm of its panic and gently, circularly met it. Her hands came to its shoulders in a low, guiding press. Her weight shifted to follow its momentum rather than resist it. She turned with it, absorbed its energy, and gradually, over the space of 3 or 4 seconds that felt much longer, redirected its desperate scrabbling into a controlled lowering. The feathered dinosaur went flat to the dirt, still, pressed against the earth. Mary's hand steady on its back. It was breathing in fast, terrified pulses, but it was not running. The Spinosaurus had not located it. Mary did not look up at the larger predator. She kept her eyes on the small creature beneath her hands. Her expression was completely calm, completely present, the god of spirit and emotions, stripped of every divine channel, working with nothing but her own trained instinct and the specific revolutionary knowledge that some things respond not to force, but to steadiness. Behind her, the cavewoman had gone absolutely still, watching Mary. Something moved through the cavewoman's expression that had no name in any language, the recognition of a quality she understood without words. Act 2. Amin Parker handles the center line. The Spinosaurus found the fire. Large predators read the world differently from humans. Where a human sees flame, a wounded, maddened Spinosaurus sees the brightest, most concentrated point of stimulus in its disrupted field of vision. The fire circle became a target, not because it was threatening, because it was there. It launched. The movement was extraordinary. 12 feet of shoulder driving 40 feet of a creature forward, at a speed that the rational mind could not fully process. The enormous jaws opened. The head came down on a trajectory aimed directly at the camp's center, directly at Amin Parker. He did not move backward, he moved sideways. 2 inches. Just 2. The Tai Sabaki pivot, the step off the line of fire that Akane had drilled into him over years of training in Okinawa, executed so precisely that the Spinosaurus's jaw streaked past his left shoulder with a sound like displaced air, and something far larger, he felt the pressure of it, the heat of the creature's breath, the physical reality of 40 feet of prehistoric predator, moving at full speed close enough to part his hair. He was already in his mabu, the horse stance, wide, rooted, his feet planted in the soft earth of the clearing with the specific, total weight distribution of someone who had spent thousands of hours making stillness into a foundation. His hands came up, open palms, angled outward, and found the side of the Spinosaurus's passing snout. He did not push. He redirected. The principle was the same as every Wing Chun and Aikido technique he had ever taught this family in the past weeks. You do not meet force with force. You borrow the force. You add a fraction of rotational guidance to something that is already moving at enormous speed, and the physics of that add-on become catastrophic for the thing you are redirecting. The Spinosaurus weighed several tons. It was moving at full sprint velocity. Amin Parker, in a 20-something mortal body with no divine energy, no alien blood, and no supernatural advantage of any kind, put his open hands against the side of its jaw and applied a rotating force so perfectly timed and angled that it leveraged the creatures. Owen momentum again stits. Balance, the head went sideways, the body followed. The Spinosaurus hit the limestone boulder at the clearing's eastern edge with a concussive impact that shook the ground for 50 meters. It did not go down. It was too large, too powerful for any single redirect to put it down. But it was staggered, confused, its equilibrium disrupted by the simple, devastating physics of being turned by something that should not have been able to turn it. It shook its head, trying to understand what had just happened. Amin stepped back into his mabu. His breathing was controlled. Even, his expression was the same expression he always had. Princess Parker, from the far side of the clearing, exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Rashim opened his mouth, then closed it. Even Amira, who had opinions about everything, said absolutely nothing. Act 3. The Unified Clan Execution. They came from the canopy, 5 of them, smaller than the Spinosaurus but far more intelligent, lean, fast, feathered along the spine, with the particular coordinated awareness of animals that had evolved to hunt in groups rather than individually. They had been tracking the Spinosaurus from the deep jungle. The large predator had been their quarry, and now it had led them, inconveniently, to a clearing with 12 unknown creatures standing in the open air. They adapted. Raptors were nothing if not adaptive. They dropped from the canopy onto the left flank, spreading wide before the family even processed where the first one had come from, and the family was already moving. Cassandra Brown was first. She did not hesitate, and she did not wait for instruction. The lead raptor fixed its attention on her, reading her as the closest target, the one with the most manageable size, and launched its signature move, a high-speed leaping strike with one foreleg extended. She read the weight shift in its haunches before the leap completed. Lopsao, the pulling hand. She caught the striking foreleg at the wrist, 2 hands, firm, controlling, and pulled it sharply across the raptor's own centerline. The creature's forward momentum became its enemy in the same instant. It was already past its point of balance when her Wing Chun chain punches began. Vertical, precise, arriving in a continuous stream that drove the raptor back into the brush with the accumulated force of a technique that trusted physics rather than brute strength. The raptor hit the brush and scrambled. It did not immediately return. Good, Amin said quietly from behind her. She had known he was watching. She had known it before he spoke. Prince Parker, who had been standing with his arms crossed in the way he always stood when he was about to be required to do something he would not acknowledge requiring effort, uncrossed his arms. The second raptor had identified him as a target. Perhaps because he was the largest remaining stationary figure. Perhaps because large, stationary things read as either very confident or very stupid, and either way, they needed to be engaged. The raptor leaped. Prince Parker did the 10-can, the 180-degree footwork pivot that had driven him absolutely mad during training, the soft circular entry that had seemed to him the opposite of how a confrontation should be handled, turned out to be exactly correct for a leaping, fully committed animal that had already given everything to its trajectory. He caught its momentum, turned with it, 180 degrees, and from the completion of the pivot, he used the raptor's own forward energy to slam it flat into the dirt, with an explosive reverse strike that had nothing soft about it. The raptor was down. It would recover. They always recovered, but it would not immediately return. Prince stood over it for a moment. He did not say anything. He simply looked at where the raptor had been, and then looked at his hands, the hands that had executed a technique he had complained about every day for the past week. He uncrossed his arms again, and kept them uncrossed. The 4 brothers had already formed their wall. Nisa, Nishim, Nimir, Shahim, moving in their characteristic synchronized silence, each one perfectly aware of the other's position without requiring a word or signal, had established a rotating perimeter between the 3 remaining raptors and the rest of the family. Their formation was not aggressive. It was absolute. The raptors probed for gaps and found none. Every angle closed before it could be taken. Every approach met a body that redirected it without meeting it directly. The raptors were frustrated. Predators evolved to identify the easiest path. There was no easy path. Rashim worked the outer edges, appearing where the raptors didn't expect him, pressing from angles that disrupted their coordination. He was not executing perfect technique. He was executing unpredictable technique, which was, for the current situation, almost more effective. You cannot coordinate against something you cannot predict. Amir had positioned himself beside Princess, using his body as a barrier, and his mind as a constant analytical running process, watching the raptors, reading their patterns, whispering observations that Princess received and processed into positioning adjustments she communicated to the brothers through gesture. Amira was on the family's right flank, moving with the sharp, economical precision that had always defined her. She wasn't searching for glory. She was eliminating vulnerabilities, which was, it turned out, exactly the right contribution. Mary Parker kept her hand on the feathered dinosaur's back. The small creature was still pressed flat, still terrified, still breathing in fast, panicked pulses. Mary was watching everything. The raptors, her family, the Spinosaurus still recovering from its impact with the boulder, the cavewoman at the clearing's edge. With the total synthesizing awareness that had always been her greatest power, she was reading it all simultaneously. She was understanding how it was going to end. The Spinosaurus shook itself upright. It fixed its attention on the raptors, whose entire coordinated predatory intelligence had been disrupted by the Parker family's formation, suddenly found themselves between a staggered Spinosaurus, recovering its composure, and 12 organized opponents who showed no signs of providing easy access. They made the calculation that every intelligent predator eventually makes. They turned toward the easier target. The Spinosaurus let out a roar that flattened the ferns at the clearing's edge. The raptors answered, and in the space of one extraordinary screaming prehistoric moment, the predators turned on each other. The cavewoman was already moving. She raised her spear, pointed north. A single sharp vocalization cut through the noise of the predator's engagement, the sound of someone who had been in situations like this before and knew exactly how long the window lasted. Mary stood. "North!" she called. Her voice carried easily over the clearing without effort or volume. "Move north! Keep the formation!" The family moved. No argument, no deliberation, not even from Prince Parker, who had been insisting since day one that his voice should be the one giving orders, because Mary's voice, in this moment, contained something that transcended the question of who was in charge. It contained clarity, it contained certainty, it contained the specific quality of someone who had synthesized every variable in the situation and arrived at the correct answer before anyone else had finished asking the question. They moved north. The cave woman led. The feathered dinosaur stayed pressed against Mary's leg as they cleared the brush at the clearing's edge, moving at speed toward the ridge to the north. Behind them, the roar of the Spinosaurus, the answering calls of the raptors, the sounds of apex predators settling an older argument. The ridge. The path was narrow. This was immediately apparent and immediately complicated. Single file only, steep underfoot, with the particular treacherous quality of prehistoric terrain that had never been worn into anything approaching a trail. Every step required judgment. Every foothold had to be chosen rather than assumed. The cave woman moved through it the way water moves through rock, finding the correct path with the automatic ease of someone who had navigated this specific terrain hundreds of times. She cleared branches as she went. She signaled, with hand gestures that required no shared language, when to duck, when to grab a root for balance, when to step left rather than right. The Parkers followed in formation. Mary stayed directly behind the cave woman. The feathered dinosaur, now moving freely but choosing to remain immediately adjacent to Mary, navigated the terrain with the agile confidence of a creature fully evolved for it. Every few steps it would glance back at her. She would meet its eyes. Something in that exchange continued to calm it. Cassandra was behind Mary, then Amin, then Princess with Amir and Amira, then the four brothers, moving with their characteristic synchronized precision that proved equally effective on a narrow ridge path as it did in a training clearing. Then Rashim, who was navigating the terrain with less grace but adequate determination, muttering low commentary to himself in the way he narrated everything. Then Prince at the rear, watching behind them, jaw set, scanning every angle. The ground moved. It happened without warning. A tremor. Not enormous, not catastrophic, but sharp and immediate, rolled through the ridge path. The ground shivered beneath their feet. Several loose stones dislodged from the path's edge and disappeared into the dense foliage below. Princess grabbed a tree root. Stable. Amir caught himself against the ridge wall with both hands, absorbing the impact with the same basic physics he'd been practicing. "We're fine," he said, quietly but clearly. "Rock formation's solid. The tremor is passing." Rashim's arm shot out sideways, catching Nishim, who had stepped onto an unstable section, and braced him until the ground steadied. "Got you," Rashim said. Nishim nodded once. No words. None needed. The cave woman had not stopped moving. She paused, looked back, checked each face, counting them the way experienced guides count their charges, and when she confirmed all 12 were still on their feet, she continued forward. She hadn't looked alarmed by the tremor. She had looked practiced. This happened here. Often enough that she had a response for it. She simply filed it under the category of things the ridge does, and continued leading. The cave woman's strength. Halfway up the ridge, a fallen tree blocked the path entirely. It was not a small fallen tree. It was ancient, enormous, and had come down across the narrow path at the worst possible angle. Too large to step over, too dense to push through. The way around it was through the foliage on either side, which would mean losing the path and potentially the formation. The cave woman studied it for approximately 2 seconds. Then she walked to one end of it, gripped the trunk with both hands, and lifted it. Not struggled with it, not strained against it in stages. Lifted it. She was tall, taller than any of the Parkers by several inches, and built with the dense, functional musculature of a creature who had spent every day of her existence in physical negotiation with a world that required physical negotiation. She moved the fallen tree section to the side, with the calm, matter-of-fact efficiency of someone removing an inconvenient object from a path. She set it down and continued walking. The Parker family stood on the path for a moment. Rashim was the one who said it. "Did she just... That was not a small..." "No," Amir said. His voice was thoughtful, precise, the particular precision of someone filing new data into an existing framework. It was not small. She lifted approximately 340 kilograms, conservatively, without a discernible change in her respiration. The implications for the tribe's average physical baseline are, he paused, significant. Prince Parker looked at the tree, then at the path where the cave woman had continued walking without looking back. "These people," he said, "are built differently from us." "Yes, Grandpa," Amira said. She had been quiet for most of the ridge path, but this had her full attention. Very differently. The mutual shield. Near the ridge's upper section, the foliage on the western side suddenly shifted. Not dramatically, not with the explosive violence of what had just happened in the clearing. A shadow. A sound, low, territorial, the kind of sound that could be a herbivore warning, or could be something with teeth making its calculations. The cave woman stopped. The Parkers stopped. The cave woman raised her spear in the direction of the disturbance. Her body went into a specific configuration, weight low, spear high, eyes fixed, that communicated warning in a way that required no shared language. Amin Parker was already beside her. He had moved without anyone seeing him move, which was, by now, becoming characteristic. He stood at the cave woman's left, slightly forward, his hands open and loose at his sides. His stance communicated nothing threatening, but it communicated presence, the specific presence of someone who knows what they are doing and has decided to be here. Princess Parker moved to the cave woman's right. Amir formed the arc behind them, pulling Mary into the center of a loose protective formation that the family fell into with the ease of something they had been practicing, without knowing they were practicing it. The sound in the brush paused, then a large herbivore, territorial and snorting, crashed across the path 40 feet ahead of them, before disappearing into the vegetation on the other side. Not a threat, just a crossing. The cave woman lowered her spear. She looked at Amin, then at Princess, then at the formation the family had built around her in the space of 3 seconds. Something moved through her expression, not surprise, exactly. She was not a person who surprised easily, but recognition. The same quality Mary had seen on her face in the clearing when Mary calmed the feathered dinosaur. These strange small people know something. The feathered dinosaur nudged Mary's hand. She looked down. It was watching her, the way the small creature had been watching her since the clearing, with the particular attention of something that has made a decision and is simply waiting for the decision to be confirmed by everyone else. She placed her hand on its head. It made a soft sound, settled. The cave woman watched this. Then she turned and continued up the ridge. The territory opens. The trees thinned gradually, and then, all at once, the path crested a rise, the dense prehistoric canopy opened above them, and the family stopped, involuntarily, simultaneously, because what was ahead of them required stopping. The tribe's territory spread below the ridgeline in the last amber light of the prehistoric afternoon. Smoke from fires rose in thin columns. Stone structures, rough, functional, built into the natural landscape rather than imposed upon it, occupied the space between the ridge and a series of cave entrances cut into the face of a limestone cliff. Torches burned at intervals. Tall silhouettes moved between the fires. The Parkers looked at each other. "They have fire," Rashim said quietly. "And structures." "Of course they do," Amir said, thoughtfully. Homo heidelbergensis, or a related archaic human group appropriate to this geological period, was cognitively sophisticated. The assumption that prehistoric humans were primitive is largely a post hoc construct based on Amira said. Yes? We can see them moving. I'm aware. They've seen us. Abil also aware, Amir said without changing his tone. The tall silhouettes at the territory's edge had stopped moving. They were looking up at the ridgeline, at the Cavewoman, at the 12 smaller, unfamiliar figures behind her. The spears came up. The tribe. They were everything the Parkers had understood the Cavewoman to suggest, and more. Tall, all of them tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the particular physical authority of beings who had never encountered a world that exceeded their ability to navigate it physically. Their faces were alert and wary, the wariness of intelligence meeting the unknown. They were not aggressive, but they were ready. The spears had come up in a specific way, not the way you raise a weapon to attack, but the way you raise it to say, "We see you, and we are telling you that we see you." The message was universal. The Cavewoman descended the ridge path into the territory ahead of the Parkers without stopping. She called out, something long and specific in a language that moved differently from any language the Parkers carried in their memories. It had a specific rhythm, a specific music. She gestured behind her. She stood between her people and the strangers. She spoke again, emphatically. Her voice carried the weight of someone whose word meant something here, whose presence was not casual, but positional. The spears did not lower, but they did not advance. The tribe watched. The attempt, Mary Parker descended the ridge path with the feathered dinosaur at her side and walked to where the Cavewoman stood. She did not stop at the edge of the tribe's formation. She walked, slowly, calmly, to stand beside the woman who had fought alongside them, and she looked at the assembled faces, 20, 30 of them, with the expression she always wore when she walked into a room, full of people who didn't know her yet, open, present, unafraid. Prince Parker came to stand beside her. His posture was different when he arrived at her side than it had been on the ridge, still rigid, still the bearing of a man who insisted on being taken seriously. But beside Mary, something about that rigidity looked like strength rather than performance. The family assembled behind them. "Hello," Mary said to the tribe. The word meant nothing to them. She could see that immediately. The sounds of it registered. Their attention sharpened when she spoke. But the meaning was absent. She pointed to herself. "Mary," then to Prince. "Prince," to Amin. Amin, to Cassandra. "Cassandra," to Princess. "Princess," moving down the line. The tribe watched in silence. Amir crouched beside her and pressed one finger into the soft earth. Began drawing a simple line, a mountain, a path, a circle representing this territory. Then, 12 small figures on the path. He looked up, at the tribe, at the drawing, back at the tribe. "We came from there," he said, pointing to the path. "We mean you no harm." But the words were lost. The gesture was not. One of the tribe, an older individual settled in the posture of someone with authority, looked at the drawing for a long time. Then, at the 12 small figures represented in it, then at the 12 actual people standing in front of him. He pointed to the drawing's small figures, then at the Parkers, then back to the drawing. It was a question. Amir said, very precisely, "Yes." The sound mimic. The exchange had been running for perhaps 10 minutes, pointing, drawing, the slow, tentative construction of the most basic shared vocabulary of gesture, when it happened. One of the tribe members, a younger adult, who had been watching the entire exchange with the intense, focused attention of someone processing everything. They opened their mouth and said, "Go." Not correctly. The vowel was slightly off, the consonant harder than an English speaker would make it, but unmistakably, unambiguously, "Go." The word Mary had used during the retreat from the clearing. A word spoken once, under pressure, in a loud and high-stress environment, heard, retained, reproduced, The Parker family went completely still. Mary looked at the tribe member who had spoken. He looked back at her with the expression of someone who had done something and was not sure what it meant, but could tell from the reaction of the people in front of him that it had meant something. Mary's eyes moved to Amin. Amin's eyes moved to the tribe member, then back to Mari. He said one word quietly to himself in Japanese, so low that only those closest to him could catch it. He was thinking. Princess heard it. Her eyes met his. Cassandra heard it. She understood immediately. She always understood what her father was thinking, slightly before anyone else did. Amir heard it, and his mind, which had been running at full processing capacity since they arrived at the tribe's territory, found the peace it had been looking for. "They can imitate," Mary said quietly. Slowly, as if the words were still organizing themselves into the shape of what they mayn't. "They can hear it once and reproduce it." "In a high-stress environment," Amir said. His voice had the quality it got when something clicked into place at the highest level of his intellect. Their auditory retention under emotional intensity is extraordinary. That word was spoken once, in the middle of a predator encounter, and they reproduced it accurately approximately 40 minutes later. He paused. "This changes the timeline for communication significantly." Prince Parker had been watching the tribe member who had spoken the word, the older authority figure, the assembled faces. "If they can learn our language," he said, slowly, working through it, "we can build an alliance." Mary was still watching the young tribe member who had said, "Go," who was now watching her, who was waiting for whatever came next. She looked back at Amin. He was already thinking about what he had whispered, Japanese. If the tribe was going to learn to communicate, if sounds and words were going to begin crossing the gap between these two groups, then there was something important about controlling which language they learned first. Something about what language a bridge was built in that determined which direction traffic moved across it. He had understood this immediately. He looked at Mary. She looked back at him. Between them, no words were needed. The understanding moved, the way understanding always moved between people who had been family, for longer than most things in this world had been anything at all. He would begin teaching the family Japanese before the tribe learned English. The tribe member who had said, "Go," looked between them, sensing something passing, sensing decision being made, and in the amber light of the prehistoric evening with smoke rising from the tribe's fires, and the sound of the ancient world settling into its nightly register around them, said it again, "Go," and waited. End of episode 1, The Cavewoman's People. 生存の言語第2は、洞窟女の民報奨は積み上がらなかった。ただ到着した、完全に形成された、巨大で、古代の鎖の深くから、そして空き地にプリ的な毛のように当たった。足の下の地面がそれと共鳴した。火の面が震えた。木が割れた。ゆっくりとではない。警告もなく、何か巨大なものがダジが谷を通り抜けるように、完全な無関心なパニックした霊で、その中に駆け込んだとき、単純に清楚側に爆発した。スピノサウルスは巨大という言葉を不十分に感じさせる方法で巨大だった。朝で12フィート。私1フィートの古代の傷ついた狂ったような生き物。その屁のひれは一弁によって破れ出血していた。ジャングルの深くから追っていた何かの前。その胃は野草手で転がっていた。ここに来たのは選んだからではない。追い立てられたからだ。それは空き地の葉地に突進して止まった。空間を読んで、火を読んで、開いた空気の中に待つ湯無地の小さな体を読んで、誰も走らなかった。第1目、3秒のルール、パーカー・メアリーが最初に働いた。スピノサウルスに向かってではない。雨のある恐竜に向かって。小さな生き物、 彼らのために戦ってくれた。危険と家族の間にの立つことを選んだ生き物は、それが到着する前にスピノサウルスの存在を感じていた。持っているすべての本能が逃げるよう叫んでいた。しかし、逃げることは、より大きな不死者の注意を引くとした。雨のある恐竜は巣にぴったりと限らになった。静かに、大手に押し付けられて、パーカー・メアリーの手が背中で安定していた。スピノサウルスはそれを見つけていなかった。パーカー・メアリーは大きな不死者を見かけなかった。北の小さな生き物に目を置いておいた。表現は完全に落ち着いていた。完全に存在していた。洞窟女は完全に静止していた。見ていた。パーカー・メアリーを見ていた。第二名、パーカー・アミンがセンターラインを担当するスピノサウルスは火を見つけた。大きな不死者は人間とは異なる方法で世界を読む。傷ついた、狂ったようなスピノサウルスにとって顔は授業の中で最も明るい、どっちも集中した刺激点だった。それは突進した。フグガキは氷河へ外れていた。12フィートの間が10フィートの生き物をメネスピードで前進させた。巨大な悪が開いた。頭がシノプティへの中心を直接標的にした軌道で下がった。パーカー・アミンを直接標的に。彼は後ろに動かなかった。横に働いた。2インチだけ。体さばきのピボットを沖縄で茜に何年もかけて叩き込まれた設計線から外れる一部、悪がスピノサウルスの先案をかすめて飛んだ。彼はその圧力を感じた。生き物の火の熱を。彼はすでにマブにいた。広く、根付いて、ソフトな図に特定の完全な体重分配で支えられた足、手が上がった、開いた小、細側にカードがついて、そしてスピノサウルスの通過する分の側面を見つけた。押さなかった。向け直した。スピノサウルスは頭が横に働いた。体が続いた。白地の灯台の視界眼の顔にバランスを乱した。角ではなかった。大きすぎた。しかし揺らいだ。混乱した。パーカー・アミンはマフに戻った。呼吸は制御されていた。均等だった。パーカー・プリンセスは気づかなかった。剣保持していた吐きを吐いた。パーカー・ラシームは口を開いた。それから閉じた。キャンベル・アミラーでさえ、すべてについて意見を守つ。何も言わなかった。第三目、統一された自足の実行ギラはカズカンから来た。武闘。スピノサウルスより小さいがはるかに知的、喫衣によってイメが生え、グループで守るように進化した動物の特定の強調した認識を持つ、痩せていて速い。彼らはそぎに落ちてきた。家族が最初のものがどこから来たかを処理する。前に広がって、そして家族はすでに働いていた。ブラウン・カサンドラが最初だった。リードラプターは彼女に注意を固定した最も管理しやすいサイズの最も小さいターゲットとして読んで、そして常夜攻撃を開始した。彼女は常夜が完了する前に腰の体重シフトを読んだ。把握、引き、そう。唾液の旋盤を手数で吠えた。両手、しっかりと制御して、そして自分のセンターラインをよきって鋭く引いた。生き物上昇、ウィドウス、イグトンゼーションジェリディ、ウィング中のチェーンパンチが始まった。水中で、精味で不死者を読みに追い込んだ。ラプターは読みに渡って転がった。すぐには戻らなかった。良いとパーカー・アミンは後ろから静かに寄った。彼女は鏡で見ていることを知っていた。彼が話す前に知っていた。パーカー・プリンスは2番目のラプターに向かった。転換。 訓練中に彼を完全にかかわせた18.0度の足木は、その条約する、完全にコミットした動物に対して制約に正しいことが判明した。彼は都会を加えた。それと共に放った。180度。そしてピボットの完了からギダギでラプターを血にかがらに叩きつけた。ラプターは倒れた。パーカープリンスは丸を再び届いた。兄弟はすでに彼を形成していた。パーカーにシール、パーカーにシーム、パーカーに見る、パーカーシャヒーム。彼らの特性的な同期した沈黙で動き、言葉や信号なしに互いの位置を完全に把握して、残りのラプターと家族の残りの間に回転する外周を確立した。彼らの体制は攻撃的ではなかった。それは絶対的だった。パーカー・ラシームは外言を働いた。ラプターが予期しない場所に現れて彼らの協調を害した。チェンバース・アメアはパーカー・プリンセスの隣に位置した。分岐的な精神を全そりゃで知らせながら、キャンベル・アミラーは遊戯にいた。白く、経済的で正確に。パーカー・メアリーは雨のある恐竜の背中に手を置いたままだった。すべてを見ていた。どのように終わるかを理解していた。スピノサウルスが揺れて立ち上がった。ラプターに注意を固定した。ラプターは方針を変えた。より大きなターゲットに向かって。スピノサウルスは発症した。ラプターは答えた。不死者同士が向き合った。洞窟のはすでに働いていた。潮を上げた。血をなさした。一つのすぶろい発声が不死者の強戦の総銀を切った。パーカー・メアリーは乗った。シェと彼女は呼んだ。左に働け、体勢を保て。家族ははたきいた。議事論なく、抽出なく、パーカー・プリンスからさえも、なぜならパーカー・メアリーの声には、誰が担当かという質問を超えた何かが含まれていたから、明確さ、確実性。彼らはフェに働いた。イガネシガは狭かった。越列相対のみ。汽車面で不群に。洞窟のは誰が顔を通り抜けるように働いた。何百回も特定のこの地形を広報した誰かの自動的な容疑者で。パーカー・メアリーは洞窟の直後に止まった。夢のある恐竜は彼女の足に隣接して選んで止まった。中ほどで倒れた木が地を完全にブロックした。洞窟女は客寿命それを研究した。それから家宝の葉に歩いて両手で缶を船み持ち上げた。努力していない。段階的に力を込めるのでもない。持ち上げた。彼女は背が高かった。パーカー家の誰よりも数インチ高い。そして目で機能的な筋力を持って作られていた。倒れた木の部分を木に動かした。それを置いて歩き続けた。パーカー、家族、羽に戻ったまま一瞬。パーカー・ラシームが言った。彼女はたった今、あの目は、あれは小さくなかった。いいえとチェンバース・アメアは言った。白くかく、小さくなかった。保守的に推定して、約300キログラムを掘り上げた。呼吸の原則可能な変化なし。不足の平均的な身体的ベースラインへの支所派。一時停止。重要だ。パーカー・プリンスは手を曲げた。それから洞窟のが振り返らずに歩き続けた道を責めて、この人たちは、と彼は言った。我々とは違って作られている。そうね、おじいさんとキャンベル・アミラーは言った。非常に違って。正午のトンミ家の勝負セクション近くで、屋敷の日上げが突然シフトした。ドラマチックにではない。シェゲ、イン、低く、縄はまり的な。洞窟は止まった。パーカー家族は止まった。洞窟は強を上げた。 体が特定の配置になった。中心が低く、強が高く、目が固定された。パーカー・アミンはすでに彼女の隣にいた。誰も彼が隠くのを見ていなかった。これはもはや特徴的になっていた。彼は洞窟の先、わずかに前に取った。脅迫するものを何も伝えないが存在を伝えた。パカセプリンセスはドンクヌの湯にどんいた。チエンバースアメアは裏に壁を形成した。パーカー・メアリーを中心の保護的な体制に引いた。恵みの音が一時停止した。それから大きな草子動物が果たし、10フィート線を横切って反対側の支障に消えた。脅威ではなかった。ただ通過。洞窟女は背を下げた。パーカー・アミンを手にた。それからパーカー・プリンセスを見にた。それから家族が3秒で作った体勢を見にた。彼女の表現の何かが映った。認識、影のある恐竜は、パーカー・メアリーの手を優しく押した。彼女は見下ろした。それは彼女を見ていた。決断を下して、その確認をただ待っている何かの特定の注意で。彼女は頭に手を置いた。柔らかい音、落ち着いた。洞窟女はこれを見た。それから振り返って見こねを続けた。領域が開くクスクススは徐々に、そして一気に薄くなった。主がビコネを登り、不明な現実時代の書簡が登場で開き、家族は止まった。崩ぎに同時に、なぜなら前にあるものは止まることを必要としたから。不足の領域がイコネの下に広がっていた。火から深い顔の種が上がっていた。死の構造物、空爆、機能的で自然の風景に押し込まれたがいくつかの洞窟の入口が切り込まれた視界源の札の前のスペースを占めていた。パーカー家族はお互いを見た。火があるとパーカー・ラシームは静かに言った。構造ももちろんですとチェンバース・アメアは言った。ホモ・ハイデルベルゲンシスまたはこの地域的時期に適切な関連する古代人グループは認知的に精錬されていた。現実時代の人間が原始的だったという過程は、初に死後的な構築物で、アメアとキャンベル・アミラーは言った。はい。彼らが働いているのが見える。わかっています。彼らは私たちを見た。一派、これもわかっています。とチェンバース・アメアは言った。強が上がった。不足彼らは目が高かった。全員目が高かった。広い間。彼らの体を物理的に超えることができる世界に決して出会ったことがない存在の特定の物理的権威で払いていた。潮は特定の方法で上がっていた。攻撃するために武器を上げる方法ではなく、我々をお前たちを見る。そしてお前たちを見ることを伝えているというためにあげる方法で、洞窟女は止まらずにパーカー家族の前にうだりた。何か長くて特定なものを読んだ。英語とは異なる鳩書きをする言語で、彼女は後ろをかみ振りした。彼女は彼女の波とよそ者の間に戻った。再び歯にした。力強く、艶は下がらなかった。しかし、前進しなかった。このみ、パーカー・メアリーは雨のある恐竜を隣に連れて、いみき間を下り、洞窟女が乗っている場所に歩いた。彼女は普通の体勢の班で止まらなかった。ゆっくりと、落ち着いて、彼女と一緒に助かったの鍋に戻すために歩いた。こんにちは。とパーカー・メアリーは不足に言った。意味は彼らに届かなかった。彼女はそれを急須に見ることができた。自分を示唆した。メアリー、それからパーカー・プリンスに、プリンス、パーカー・アミンに、アミン、 続けた。チェンバース・アメアは、しゃがんで柔らかい図に角を押した。シンプルな先を描き始めた。シャン、ダオ、このリンユをビャオスユアン、それからダオのシャンのジアンの小さな人物。我はそこから来たと彼はいい道を示唆した。あなた方に海を与えるつもりはない。言葉は使われた。雷は使われなかった。権威ある姿勢に落ち着いた年配の不足の一人が長い抱えを見にた。それから中の小さな人物を、それから前に立つ時期、二人の地域の人々を、絵の小さな人物を示唆した。それからパーカー家族を、それから絵に戻った。それは質問だった。チェンバース・アメアは非常に正確に言った。はい。家の魔法交換はおそらく十分目続いていた。羽差し、描き、皮膚里の最も基本的な共有の由外の赤い、好みに満ちた構築。それが起こったとき、不足のメンバーの一人、若い精進。こう。正確ではなかった。メゲギンがわずかにずれていた。字銀が英語貨車が作るより硬かった。しかし、紛れもなく、異界なく、ゴー。パーカース・メアリーが破棄地からの撤退中に振った言葉は、タコストレス環境で一度発された言葉。聞かれた、保持された、再現された。パーカー家族は完全に静止した。パーカー・メアリーはその言葉を話した。プスのメンバーを招いた。彼は彼女を見返した。何かをして、それが何を意味するか確かではないが、前の人々の反応から何かを意味したとわかる誰かの表現で、パーカー・メアリーの屁がパーカー・アミンに働いた。けれは魔法できると、パーカー・メアリーは静かに祈った。タコストレス環境でとチェンバース・アメアは祈った。感情的な強度の下での彼らの聴覚保持はへぶれている。その言葉は死因は、不死者との相互の過失旅下に一度話され、約20分後に正確に再現された。彼は維持停止した。これはコミュニケーションのタイムラインをアダクに変える。パーカー・プリンスはごと言った不足のメンバーを命じていた。もし彼らが我々の言語を学べるならと彼は言った。ゆっくりとそれを通じて作業しながら同盟を構築できる。パーカー・メアリーはまだごと言った。若い不足のメンバーを招いていた。パーカー・アミンを見れた。彼はつぶやいた小言葉について考えていた。日本語。章がどの言語で構築されるかが、どの方向に交通が流れるかを決定した。彼はそれをすぐに理解していた。パーカー・メアリーを見れた。彼女は見返した。言葉は必要なかった。彼は家族に日本語を教え始めるだろう。フソが英語を学ぶ前に。5と言ったフソのメンバーは2人の歯で何かが通り過ぎるのを感じ取った。決断が下されるのを感じ取って、そして太古の夕方のコハヒルの光の中でまた言った。そして参った。第1話終わり。洞窟の民